Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Uh, Happy Thursday. We'll give it just a second here for everyone to get their audio situated and join, and then we will get started. All right, let's jump into it. So welcome, super excited to be with you guys today to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is MBA admissions and specifically for M7 schools. Um, and so my goal today is to make this literally as helpful for you as humanly possible. So I would say, feel free to, I always say this, most people don't, but feel free to come off mute, interrupt me, ask questions, anything that's on your mind. You can also message in the chat and I will do my best to sort of monitor there and answer any questions. I have tried to just pack this with content on really like 10 things that are just essential to get really admitted to any of the M7 schools. But doing these things well can land you multiple admissions calls. So super excited to be with you, and yeah, hopefully we can make this as engaging as possible. So just to start, I'll share a little bit about myself. So my name's Timothy. I started my career at Goldman Sachs, and then I got my MBA from Chicago Booth, and I was an admissions fellow while I was at Booth, which means that I was working with the admissions team, reviewing portions of the application, and interviewing applicants for admission to the school. And I personally loved the admissions process or the application process. Felt like it was very reflective, and I kind of just geeked out on it, which is why I became an admissions fellow. And then I really enjoyed that as well. I loved conducting interviews, talking with applicants, hearing their stories. And so after I graduated, I started doing admissions consulting. Um, and I've been doing admissions consulting for a little over 4 years now. Um, while I've been working at Boston Consulting Group, I recently left BCG and now lead AI and inorganic growth, so M&A for a company called Lennox, and still do a lot of admissions consulting across both like the full time, deferred, part time, sort of all the different cycles. So that's a
Tim,
little bit about my background.
Timothy, can I interrupt and ask, is that Lex.page?
The company that I work
Yes.
for.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's Lennox International. It's an HVAC company.
I see. Okay. Excuse me.
Yeah. No worries, no worries. Cool. All right, let's dive into why we're all here, which is to talk about sort of the 10 essential things that have to be present in your application to M7 business schools. So the first is, and each of my clients, will often tell me this is maybe like one of the hardest parts, but it's really getting that sort of depth and authenticity to your story or your narrative, right? So the admissions committee is looking for a set of things, and it's really important that you sort of tie your background to those things. And this is what I call like the, overarching strategy, right? You have to think about like what in your background aligns with those things, and then how can you use the different components of the application to, check all of those boxes. And so a few of those things that they're looking for here uh, really center around authenticity of your story. So where you've had challenges, where you've had unique growth experiences, what are sort of like defining moments in your background um, that have shaped who you are, and then trying to bring out your authentic voice. Um, I have seen applicants, I've reviewed applications from folks who asked me, why they got rejected, and oftentimes one part of it is the narrative feels very like off the shelf, like something that like chat gpt would write. The more you can sort of infuse your authentic voice into the narrative, uh, there's a creativity aspect of this here, which is one of the things I love the most about the application process. But the more you can sort of bring that out, the more they'll remember you kind of 24 hours after they read the application, right? So you want to think about this as like almost like your personal pitch to them about who you are. And just to give you an example around the defining moments, I had a client a couple of years ago write about a tennis match that he was in as a kid, and he cheated in the middle of the match because he was kind of upset with his opponent, and his coach caught him cheating. And that interaction of his coach, uh, you know, just saying how disappointed he was in him was really like one of those sort of defining moments. And so one of the things he talked about was his values, and he used that as an experience to talk about how that experience had shaped his values. I had another client talk about, she presented at a large investment bank, and in the middle of the presentation froze up, like looked up, saw all the people and kind of froze and couldn't think, and then started crying and like left the room. And she talked about how traumatic that experience was. But then after the fact, sort of reflecting on that and recognizing how she had to find her own authentic voice when it was public speaking. She couldn't just like read from note cards. She had to, believe what she was saying and sort of speak with conviction, and how that has helped her now later in her career with her executive presence. So those are just two examples. Both of those folks were admitted to top schools, but that just gives you an example of what this looks like, because I recognize it's a little bit ambiguous. All right. Maybe I'll go through a couple of these, and then we can pause for questions. I want to make sure we have enough time to get through all the content. So the second one question I get all the time, right, is like, is my GMAT score high enough? My GPA is low. Can I still get in? And really, the way to answer this question, or this set of questions, is to understand what the admissions committee is looking for in those metrics, right? So why do they ask you to submit your GPA, right? And why do they make you take these painful tests? And the reason why is because they want to bring a community together of folks who can sit in the classroom, contribute meaningfully to the discussion, and really build a lot of richness, right? Folks from different backgrounds, bringing a lot of insights and sort of collaborating together to maximize the education impact at the institution, right? And so these are metrics to sort of demonstrate your intellectual curiosity and your commitment to the academic rigor of the program. There are a lot of reasons folks get an MBA, but at the end of the day, these are like universities, right? And it's a master's degree. And so the coursework really matters. Certainly to the school and to the admissions committee. And so the way to think about this is, how can you demonstrate, one, that you're intellectually curious, and two, that you are committed to the academics of this program. And so maybe just to touch on a couple of things here, right? One is, if you have a low GPA or you have a low test score that you feel like you can't increase, like, how do you overcome that, right? So one answer is for GPA, you can share like what was going on in your life during that time, to give them more context around why your GPA was lower and how things are different now, right? To the point of you being able to demonstrate that you can be successful in the classroom today. Quantitative coursework or quantitative experience in your career can help as well, or relevant quantitative coursework where you've performed well. Another thing that helps, candidly, that a lot of applicants don't really think about is just like the quality of your application, right? If the ideas in your essays are thoughtful and interesting and unique to them, that will help them get comfortable that you actually do have really strong critical thinking skills and could meaningfully contribute to the discussion. A red flag, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, but like, one red flag is if there's errors, even sort of silly or small errors in the content, that's one way to signal a little bit of carelessness. And they sort of extrapolate for how that would show up in your participation in the program. So let's see. I think there's something going on in the chat. Brian, it's a great question. The answer is yes. I have seen folks with previous master's degrees. I've worked with folks with law degrees that will use that as a signal of your commitment to the academics. I think the one thing to think about there, and we'll talk about this more, but is just you want to build a real cohesive narrative around your career. Um, so you want to think about how all those pieces fit together. But yes, that can absolutely be one signal of your academic aptitude. All right, if I have a strong undergrad GPA but a poor professional school GPA, did not complete the program, how does admissions view this? So I think poor professional school GPA. This was after you had another, like you enrolled in another program that you didn't complete. Okay, I think so. It's I would say like unaddressed, it's a bit of a red flag, Anthony. I think the thing to think about is like how do you tell a story around this to sort of help them understand what was going on, why you didn't complete it, why you didn't perform well, especially because you had previously performed well in school, which I think then becomes a signal that you can do well, right? So it's more around how you tell that story uh, um, to help them get comfortable. All right, I'm going to keep going. We can touch on this more if y'all have additional questions at the end. All right, leadership. Everybody sort of talks about leadership. Hopefully, you all know leadership is a very important component of the application, especially for the M7 schools. But one thing to keep in mind is, or maybe a couple things, right? They really care about the leadership story or the leadership trajectory. So it's not just about highlighting that you've like already, done all these great leadership things. It's more about showing growth, leadership growth, and interpersonal awareness, and and an evolution there, right? Some signals could be like formal leadership roles. Others could just be like informal roles where you had to sort of collaborate across a large group of stakeholders and get something done, something complex done, right? This is like a massive skill in business more broadly. And so to show that you can, bring everybody together and influence people who have different perspectives, like that's incredibly valuable. And so I would think about your own leadership story. This should show up through your resume. Like there should be a clear sort of path or journey on your resume, as well as this is very common. Aspects of this will be very common in the curiosity and growth essay at Harvard, or the what matters most to you at GSB, or even like the personal essay at Booth. So you want to think about sort of how you can tell a leadership story. Oftentimes, too, it will manifest outside of like not just in the professional realm, but also with other leadership learnings that you've had more personally in some of those other areas. All right. I'll do one more, then we can pause for some questions. So another important component that I would say a lot of applicants sort of underemphasize is this idea of teamwork. So part of this is just showing some self-awareness. Part of it is showing a willingness to collaborate. I think part of this is also showing like what role you play in teams. So you'll get that question, oftentimes in MBA interviews, but it's also on their mind as they're sort of reviewing your application, right? It's like what's your sort of style when you come in to collaborate and work with people, and how do how does that manifest itself? Um, Another important component here is conflict resolution, right? Have you worked with folks that you didn't care for? Have you ever had a really bad, sort of interaction with somebody at work, or and sort of how you navigate that? So you can think back to the example I gave of even the guy tennis with his coach sort of coming down on him, right? Like being able to sort of show how to work through that. Other examples could be more direct, like peer-to-peer sort of conflict, and how you work through that can be really helpful to highlight here as well. All right, I'm gonna pause and take a couple of other questions here. Um, so there's a question. I got a question about how international students are viewed in the admissions process, and it's the same as everybody else, I guess would be my short answer. They're looking to build a diverse class, folks who have basically diversity across every dimension, right? And so they're of course looking for folks. I think in basically every class profile, they report on the number of countries represented. So they're looking for folks from all over the world. All right. Great question. So with GPA, is difficulty of the degree taken into account? My undergrad is an engineering degree. So great question. The answer is yes. And I would even say like one click deeper than that, they will look at your transcript and look at which courses you scored better versus worse and how difficult those courses are. And this can be a great way to highlight again quantitative abilities, right? If they're complex or advanced engineering courses where you scored particularly well. Uh, Elaborate more on the leadership story. Does it have to show growing responsibility and leadership? Uh, uh, yes, that's the important piece, right? Is not just that you can show great leadership experiences. A lot of applicants have really strong leadership experiences. What is more attractive to them is seeing that you have an understanding of your own leadership strengths and weaknesses, and how you've grown as a leader and how you have sort of awareness around that. They want to see a trajectory, right? Nobody's born this like super dynamic leader, right? And so it's like, how have you sort of developed your leadership style, and where are there still areas where you'd like to develop? And an MBA is a great opportunity to do that, right? It's an opportunity to kind of put your career on hold and really reflect and kind of develop specific aspects of your leadership. So you want to spend some time kind of thinking about that. The more you can present that leadership story, strengths, weaknesses, how it's evolved over time, the better. Hopefully that answers your question. Um, so this is a great question, Brock. How do you tell a story about overcoming personal difficulties without it coming across as a "woe is me" pitch? So I'm going to talk about that more in just a sec here. So I'm gonna table that for this next page, or let's go into it here. Um, so one super important piece of the application is you want to show that you can turn setbacks into stepping stones, or you are willing to experience failure, get knocked off your feet, and then sort of pick yourself back up. And the reason this is so important is because uh, n- nobody sort of achieves success across everything all the time. I probably don't have to tell you guys that, but like if you're gonna swing for the fences, like you're just gonna fail sometimes, right? It's just a part of success. And so the more you're willing to accept that failure, acknowledge it, learn from it, and then sort of persevere despite it, that is incredibly important part of the application. And so you have to think about how you can sort of how you can demonstrate that, and maybe to answer your question a little bit more directly, um, you 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 want to show interpersonal awareness around what actually happened. So when you think about versus like versus a "woe is me" pitch, you want to share. Um, you want to be open about what happened. You want to be very open about like how it felt, um, and then from there you want to quickly sort of get to the learnings and how you grew as a result of it. So I think, if your essay is sort of oriented around this is what happened, this is why it was super difficult, to sort of stop there, that's pretty tough, right? Um, but not that different than the two previous examples I gave you, right? Of somebody presenting, sort of freezing up, in tears and walking away. Really that ultimately ends up being a story of perseverance. She had an opportunity a year later by crazy luck to present in the same building for a different set of under a different set of circumstances. And that time she brought more authenticity because she had learned from the experience, and she was able to successfully, deliver the presentation. And she talked about how sort of therapeutic that was for her to kind of overcome that previous super embarrassing and shameful experience. So, and the same with the other example I shared, right? So I think the way to overcome the woe is me pitch is to understand like how you learned from it, show that you're sort of willing to pick yourself back up and get back in the ring, and then embrace the personal growth that comes along with it. So the growth mindset here is incredibly important. Um, Hopefully that helped answer your question, Brock. All right, when you say you want to show, do you mean you need to actively incorporate these stories into our essay resume? Do we keep the stories ready in case they ask about it during the interview? Okay, great question. I hope I say your name right. Rawaj. Great question, Rawaj. You need to incorporate all of this content in the application. So in the essay, you should be thinking about how you can show leadership, how you can show the leadership story, how you can show resilience over time, or sort of a willingness to grow and overcome failure over time. Like all of these components are sort of fundamental to the application, even to sort of get the interview. I'm getting a question about the difference between regular MBAs and deferred. I would say deferred MBAs, you need to be a little bit more thoughtful about some of these components because you haven't had the career experience where a lot of these things would come to fruition. So you want to think about like how can you tell a leadership story, during your college experience? How can you highlight areas where you failed? How can you highlight group work or teamwork that you've already had? And I would say the bar is a little bit higher for you to sort of check those boxes. So hopefully that helps to the person that asked that question. And feel free to reach out to me if you have additional questions. We can chat offline. All right. What are examples of overall personal narratives? Just not sure if my current ideas are too shallow or too personal. Great question, Patrick. I mean, the two examples that I previously shared, are both examples of or components of personal narratives. Let me think of another sort of recent one that from a client that would be comfortable if I shared. I can build an extension of but sort of on one of the previous ones I shared. So the woman who shared that experience about public speaking, she also, so her whole essay was sort of around getting comfortable with herself and understanding herself and how that gave her strength. And so the first part of her essay, she talked about growing up as a kid. She felt uncomfortably tall. She was like really tall, and it was like embarrassing and difficult with dating or whatever. And then she talked about sort of her evolution to get comfortable, like in her own space, and how that sort of influenced the way she showed up, even at work, right? Then she talked about the public speaking experience, and then she shared one other experience that I won't get into, but sort of all three of those centered around like getting comfortable with herself. And you can see how like all of these highlight some vulnerability, show a willingness to fail and overcome, as well as like a high degree of self-awareness. So those are some of the things that you want to be thinking about in the personal narrative. Hopefully that helps, Patrick. Let's see. How can I demonstrate and emphasize my leadership abilities if I'm currently not in a supervisory role? Okay, that's an excellent question, Crystal. So what I would say, this sort of goes back to the difference between formal versus informal leadership opportunities. So I would say, like, invariably you have had opportunities to lead, even if they've been informal, right? Where there's an initiative you're in charge of, or you need to get something done, and there's you rely on somebody else. They have a different set of priorities, and so then the question is like, how do you function in those environments? And the essays are a great place to sort of talk about this because you have more liberty to sort of explain the context, right? Like in your resume, it's just sort of a list of things that you've done and what the impact was. That's where more of these formal leadership capacities will come into play. But the informal opportunities that you've had, um, the essays is a great place to sort of explore some of the challenges that you've had, around those, and sort of how you've grown and worked through them. So hopefully that helps. All right. Are formal leadership roles held in undergrad still relevant to the application, or does admissions primarily focus on post-grad leadership experiences? Carson, great question. For deferred, the answer is yes. For full-time, I would say it depends on the significance of the formal leadership role. So I would think about it and maybe be selective and sort of pick it from the best. Informal leadership opportunities. Let's see. I'm just gonna do a quick time check. Yeah, I can give examples, right? So one would be like an initiative that you were in charge of. One would be extracurriculars, like if you're the head of the women's network or LGBT network in your company. Other examples would be a volunteering experience that you're a part of, where maybe like you're have stewardship or responsibility over a part of the organization. Um, let's see, what else do I see very often? A lot of the other informal ones are, it's like in organizations that you've been a part of outside of work, or inside of work, but less formal capacities, where it's like you're responsible for a deliverable or for an outcome. Like say you're like a product manager, right? And you have to like work with the engineering team and the sales team and like all these different people, and somebody doesn't want to play ball, and you have to sort of work through that. Yes, like owning a deliverable for client work definitely could count. Yep. All right, let's press forward. I want to make sure we have enough time to get through these, and then we can take more questions at the end. All right, you want to tailor each narrative. This is another big mistake I see quite often. So one thing that you may not have thought of, but I think as I say it, you'll realize is actually pretty obvious, is that the admissions committees of each of these schools, they're like very aware of their peer schools' essays, right? And application requirements. And so, if they start seeing an essay that sort of answers a peer school's question, that's a red flag for them, right? They're all very interested in understanding who among the applicant pool is really committed to their program and really wants to go there. And of course, they can't ask anybody, right? Because everybody would say it's their first choice. But they want to admit people who are going to go, right? They don't want to admit a bunch of people who are then going to go somewhere else, and then it sort of damages their admissions percentage and yield and all the things that applicants look at to assess like where they want to apply, right? There are material nuances in the application prompt, so my warning would be to like read them very carefully, and be very careful that you don't sort of take content that you have prepared for another school and sort of apply it elsewhere. This isn't to say that you can't take like the core themes or the fundamental elements and all that reflection and all that strategy work that you've done and say like this is really the content that I want to build a narrative around. Like 100% I recommend doing that. But when it comes to getting it on the paper, you need to think about some of the nuances around the particular prompt, right? I also recommend doing a significant amount of research about the program. And part of this is just to sort of avoid generic statements about the program. You want to kind of understand what do they see as their true differentiators. And we'll talk about this more in just a sec, but the more you can sort of tie those differentiators to your background or what you want to get out of your career, the better. Like that's gonna build a very compelling career narrative. And then generally, I would say you just want to avoid generic statements. Harvard is known for sort of hating this. Like you want to stay away from buzzwords, or sort of there's a set of like constant language that you want to be careful to avoid, because they just sit all the time, and I can tell you it starts to feel like it feels very generic at the end of the day, and so they're very sensitive to that. All right, you want to think about what you bring to the school. So Wharton, right, has an essay around what are you going to contribute, and I will tell you that while they explicitly ask it is on everybody else's mind as well. So I would think about from your career experience, from your cultural background. Maybe you have some hobbies or volunteer experiences or some passion project across these different dimensions. What do you bring to sort of enrich the community, right? If you think about it from an admissions committee's perspective, they sort of have this constant problem, which is that the 50% of the class is resetting every year. And so they're always trying to bring in that richness and diversity of perspective, and candidly, just like experience, right? I came from a finance background. When I was at Booth, I wanted to shift into more of a operator or strategy type role, and was recruiting for consulting. And most of the help that I got was either from my peers who came from consulting, or second years who had successfully recruited and done a summer internship at my target firms. And so, that industry experience that you can bring from your background, that can help a ton, as well as some of these other dimensions that can bring richness to the experience. All right. So now we talk just a little bit, and then I'll take a couple more questions around the career narrative. So here's the trick here to think about, right? You want to think about what's the thread or sort of clear thread between what you've done in the past and what you're saying, your sort of career ambitions are short term and long term, right? And you have to delineate between the two. You have to have sort of what you want to do immediately after you graduate. That has to make sense to them and be believable. And then you need to build something, a long term career narrative or ambition that will resonate with them as well. And in the middle of sort of the what you want to be when you grow up, what you want to do after, and what you've done in the past, you really need to think about what is the problem statement of your application. So this is one area where I see a lot of applicants go wrong, right? You want to think about what don't you have, or what do you lack, and why do you need an MBA, right? So I see a lot of folks who will sort of state their career ambitions and talk about all the great things they've done in the past. And one question that will be on their mind is like, why don't you just go do these things you're saying you want to do? So you need to build a real compelling case around why you need an MBA to be successful. Like why can't you go do them without the MBA, right? And another key sort of component of that is like, why now? Why is now the right time for you to do this, right? And I think the more you can showcase this, the better. So just to give you an example, right? If your career goal, say your short-term career goals, you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to launch a venture, and I don't know, an energy startup, say. And then long-term, you want to be a VC investor after you are wildly successful with your venture and go public and make millions of dollars. So the question on their mind, the question I would ask you if I was your admissions coach, right, would be, okay, what have you done? What experiences from your background have sort of helped you realize that this is the right career path for you, right? You need to convince them that you really know this is what you want to do. So have you ever like kind of dipped your toes in entrepreneurial things? What's your background in energy? Like, do you understand the energy industry? Like, why energy, right? And is it believable that you really care about this and you're really going to do it? And even like launching a venture, that's incredibly difficult and scary and can be stressful. And so they'll want to understand, they'll want to get convinced that you have, understand what it takes. They believe that you have what it takes, right? And then the question will be, okay, why don't you just start it now? Like, why is the MBA sort of the best path to get you there? All right, I'll pause here just briefly. Uh, is mentioning a specific name of a current student friend at the university who I consulted in an essay a good thing, or is it frowned upon? So great question, Sam. Uh, it can be helpful, but the I think the thing to think about is uh, why. That's what I would say. Um, like why are you bringing them up, and sort of like what's the point? Like, what did you learn from them? I think just name dropping is never going to be good. Uh, but the more you can share, like uh, where dropping names or conversations that you've had is particularly helpful is around some of the more like qualitative cultural aspects of the program. So if you're talking about fit within the community and what you have seen so far in the community, um, you can like talking with students and with alumni can be a great way to help you understand that a little bit better. Hopefully that helps. How should deferred applicants approach expertise, industry expertise or otherwise? Great question, Alexander. So, I would think about like your college experience, right? What you studied, if you've spoken to anybody in these industries, or like previous like sort of work you've done so far to help you understand your career goals. I think for you, for you and for other deferred applicants, the specificity around sort of the career ambition is the bar there is a bit lower because they recognize that you haven't had the professional experience yet. But I think it is helpful to talk about, what you plan to do or what you have, you're lined up to do after you graduate from college, and then how you see your career unfolding beyond the MBA. Okay, could you give some examples of good answers for what an MBA program is good for? I don't want to be too generic and say network, but that genuine is a genuine value for me. So great question, Somel. I would say leadership growth, right? The like developing the entrepreneurship toolkit, learning financial analysis, to build models to understand or evaluate investment deals, building a financial or a foundational business knowledge, right? If you were a non-business undergrad student, um, developing executive presence, which I guess is a component of leadership. Inside of any of these, you can sort of think of like the sub aspects where you feel like you kind of need the most. Like if you're going to mention the entrepreneurship toolkit, I would think about what specific things you really want to achieve. What are others that I see quite frequently? I think the network does come up. You have to be thoughtful about how you make it real for them so that it doesn't, to your point, doesn't feel like sort of generic. Um, uh, what are other big ones people often talk about? Professional development opportunities, recruiting, uh, uh, um, understanding specific components of business education. So, if you were like, say you have like a master's in accounting, you want to build a more robust understanding of, capital markets and macroeconomic policy and how all those things shape for come together for a future career in finance. So it really has to tie to your background a bit. So like these are just examples, right? I would think about what you've done, and so this whole kind of career narrative that I'm describing, and then you can help tailor it to yourself. So hopefully that helps. How and where do we show why an MBA, why now, and how we understand what it takes for our career goals? So great question. It's a little different based on each of the schools. Um, so for like Columbia, for example, they kind of separated out in two different essays, right? The first essay is more focused around like what do you want to do, and you can talk about why you need an MBA to get there. And then their third essay is just centered around why Columbia. So they sort of break it out versus GSB um, has it sort of all in one essay, right? So it kind of depends a little bit on the school. I would say generally these different components, when I describe this career narrative, it will come together in two places in the application. One is almost every school has short, very brief, usually like 50 characters for you to state your career goals. And then the second is there's typically a or multiple essays dedicated to sort of why the school, what you want to do in your career. So those are typically the places to speak to it. As an MBA admissions interviewer yourself, what do you look for when hearing the future goals? What are some cases that make a candidate stand out? So Stephanie, it's a great question. It really comes down to some of these things that I've shared, right? It's like, do I believe your career goals? Do I believe that you have what it takes, like that you understand what it takes? Maybe is a better way to say it, to get there. Is what you're saying you want to do immediately after the MBA? Like, is that a pipeline opportunity for MBA students, right? Um, and do you understand sort of the steps between? So you immediately after graduate, you say you want to go into investment banking. Do you understand the steps between that and what you're saying you want to do in the long term? Have you been thoughtful about that? And then I think looking at your background and how that sort of shows demonstrated commitment to these future goals, and it helps explain like how this is what you want to do, right? They want to see some certainty around it at this point in your career. So those are some of the things that I look for. So I'm getting a question around some questions to ask students and alumni when you speak to them. It's a great question. So the trick here, right, is you want to sort of do your homework in two ways. So one is like I would do a bunch of desk research on the school, so that you understand, what are like the top 10 sort of unique things about this school. And then the second is you want to go into the conversation with really good awareness around the story you're trying to tell in your profile, because that will allow you to ask very targeted questions to accomplish a specific thing. So like in your, say you're applying to Booth, in your why Booth narrative, say one of the things you're talking about is leadership, and you have done your research and the leadership or the Booth only has one required course, and it happens to be a leadership course. So if you want to talk about that because leadership is one of the things that you're building a case around for why you need to go to Booth, then you can ask a ton of questions about the lead program. What you liked, what you didn't like, what was the most sort of revealing thing about it? What does it take to be a lead facilitator? In your second year, what does that process look like? How do you support students? What was the hardest module? What was the easiest? Like sort of all the questions. And then I would listen to them and I would ask follow-up questions. Like you just want to probe as much as possible to really get specific, because that's how you're going to extract like meaningful insights that then you can include in your application. Hopefully that's helpful. All right. Excellent question. What if I don't really know what specific career I want after getting my MBA? So great question. And I would say maybe like the first thing is like you're not alone. So a lot of folks, right, will pursue an MBA to explore, almost like as a career reset, right? You can explore a lot of different career opportunities and then find one that's most exciting to you. You have to have a career narrative in your application. You have to even really be considered. And so I think there is a little bit of thought here around like sort of, what you state as your career narrative. After you're admitted, nobody's going to sort of hold you down to that and say, well, you said you wanted to do this, so you can only recruit for these things. I think the schools candidly like know there's a lot of exploration that goes on, and they sort of embrace it. Like I think it was like my second or third week at Booth, we had like a whole 2-day thing where they brought in alumni from like literally every sector and every function, and you could just go to panels, like panel after panel after panel, and listen to these alumni talk about their careers, what they liked, what they didn't like, how their careers evolved, what a day in the life is like, to help the students sort of find, what they want to pursue. And so I think they understand that there's a lot of that sort of career exploration. I think they want to admit folks who are being very thoughtful about their career, and have spent some time really thinking about how they will make the most of the program. And so I think for those reasons, you have to have a compelling career narrative in your application. All right. I'm going to take two more, and then maybe we can keep going here. If you're coming in with only less than 3 years experience, how do you show the AdCom that you've had high quality experience? What else can you do to get level playing field? So great question here. So a couple of thoughts, right? One is impact. So you like the more you can show demonstrated impact in those 3 years, the better. In your resume, I would pack impact into every single bullet. Um, and by impact, I don't mean like being a force for change. I mean like generating $20 million in incremental revenue per year. Like it needs to be unbiased and it needs to be measurable impact. Um, I think also showing a lot of maturity. So the personal essays will be very important for you, and sort of showing how you've learned and how you've grown. And basically, you need to sort of build a case that you have experienced, that you have achieved accelerated sort of development, personal and professional development, and how you sort of tell that story around how you've learned and grown is how you'll be able to do that successfully. Um, so that's a great question. All right. So I got a great question here in a message um, about people showing too much success. And so the question is, how can we ground our applications to make sure it doesn't come off as too successful? And to the person that wrote this, I will just say I am so glad you brought this up, because th- this is a huge mistake that I see applicants make. I have seen applicants with insane experiences and backgrounds get rejected from multiple, like many top schools, multiple top schools, because they sort of just come off as very proud of their accomplishments. And the warning I will give you is that uh, the the EdCom see success literally all the time, and so it's just not that attractive to them. What they care about is people who are self-aware, people who are willing to fail, and sort of people who understand their own growth. And I think they know, like we all probably know, right, that there's nobody who just like gets it right every time in life. And so if that's the story that you're painting, it will not resonate with them. I've seen that many times. Um, Now, clearly there are plenty of opportunities to demonstrate your success or to articulate it. There's sections for awards, your resume, you want to show high impact. So you have to get it right, right? But I think you need to be very thoughtful about sort of how you weave in some of those other qualitative components that I've talked about, because they are super important. All right, I'm going to push us forward because we only have 10 minutes here, and I want to make sure we hit on these last couple. So demonstrating fit within the school is incredibly important. So the hack here, right, is you want to think about. I often kind of describe this as like a two-dimensional, like a two by two, where one dimension is what's differentiated or what's unique to the school, right? So if you say I want to go to Columbia because they have a great negotiations class, what the Columbia admissions committee will infer from that is you don't know why you want to go to Columbia, because every top 10 business school has a great negotiations class, and the curriculum in the class is the same for every school. So you need to cite things that are actually unique to the school. Otherwise, they will feel like you don't really understand their program. That's the first axis. And then the second is sort of tying it to you, right? So you want to cite things that sort of tie to all these personal components that we've been talking about tonight, right? So if you're talking about how you want to develop leadership growth and it's in two or three particular areas, then when you talk about the leadership ventures at Wharton, you can talk about how that structure would be uniquely beneficial to help you achieve those particular leadership growth objectives that you're seeking. And so the more it's differentiated from peer schools, and the more it ties, really nicely into the career and personal sort of growth story that you're building, that's the way to really convince them that you've been thoughtful about why you belong at the school. All right, the last one, again, maybe this feels very self-explanatory, but I can't emphasize this enough. It really needs to be error free. I think as somebody who like writes the content, I will warn you that you probably have some like blindness around potential errors in the application. And so I would have other people read it. This is like one of the many places where I think a coach or consultant can help. I was reviewing a application last night for one of my current clients to Harvard, and called out like a double space in her application. Those types of things may feel very trivial to you, but this is a signal to them of your commitment to the program, right? If they start seeing errors, then it's going to feel like you sort of slapped it together, and what they infer from that is it's like not really where you're interested in going, or you clearly don't care that much about it. And I can't stress this enough too, for sort of the quality of the writing in the essays. It's so important. It's so important. They read these like all day, right? And so I can tell you, since I also read them all day, I can tell you that you can see the ones that have been really helpful, and they sort of jump off the page, leave you thinking after you read them, and leave you interested. And then there's sort of a sea of mediocre content where things can sort of get lost. And so you need to be really thoughtful about how you tell that story in a way that's interesting and will resonate with them. All right, that's it in terms of the content. Thanks a lot for joining. Happy to stay on for questions. I think we have a few more questions. I will tell you, the Leland team has added a couple of perks. And you can let me know like if you want to share any additional context here. But I think what they're offering is anybody who signs up by the end of the month will get 3 free months of Leland Plus. I'm a big contributor on Leland Plus. I've had my clients go watch videos that I posted or use some of my content, together in our work together, as well as free admissions into the MBA boot camp. This is a $1,200 admissions ticket to the upcoming boot camp. I also have been a contributor to the MBA boot camp, and it's a super valuable resource to sort of complement the comprehensive coaching experience. You'll get a lot of different perspectives as well, and then we can sort of bring those together in our partnership together. So huge amount of value there for folks who are interested in working together. Please reach out. Let's work through logistics and would love to partner with you. All right, I will pause and take a few more questions. Let's see. I'm trying to find where I stopped. All right. How many years of experience should we aim for? I graduated from undergrad in May. Don't want to delay my grad school efforts since we can't anticipate what the future entails. So great question, Sebastian. I would say, I mean, you can kind of answer this by looking at their class profile. Like most of the folks who get admitted have 3 to 5 years of work experience. I think for your particular situation, Sebastian, it may be helpful to take it offline. I can look at your resume and your work experience, and then I can help provide more specific guidance on what I recommend there. But it is a great question. Do deferred essay prompts change often every year? They don't change every year, Patrick. But I would say all the essays prompts change occasionally. I mean, Harvard's recent change is evidence of that, right? What are some common red flags, downfall you've seen in military veteran applications? Great question, Dante. So when it comes to sort of veteran applicants, I think one of the challenges, or maybe like a couple of challenges, I would say, right? One is you're going to have a lot of experience sort of centered around the super impactful, experience that you've had. And so I think it's like, how do you bring richness and sort of some diversity to your background, or more breadth to your background? I think that's one piece. And I think the second piece is just making it real for them. What I see a lot of times with military clients is, they have a tendency, like there's like a whole nother language I've learned, in the military world. And so I think it's like, you have to be really careful that you're sort of presenting stuff to them in a way that they'll be able to understand and keep up. All right. Hopefully that helps. As a prospective deferred MBA applicant, what if all my internships are from different industries? How do we show some expertise, cohesive narrative, also being an incoming associate at MBB? Patrick, it's a great question. Like, you have to be really thoughtful about why you did each of those things, right? Like, what were you looking for? What did you learn? How did that sort of inform the next one to sort of build that cohesion to the story? Is what I would say there. And I wouldn't say MBB is a disadvantage by any means. Alexander, do you want to? I saw you raised your hand. Did you have a question? You can just throw it out.
Yes, I'm having a hard time typing though because I'm moving. So
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
um I'm looking at a school largely for a specific program that you only apply to after admission to the general MBA. And I wonder if you have any tips on shaping my narrative so it emphasizes the program without like putting the cart before the horse. Making it like I'm applying to the program which you initially need to get into the general MBA for.
What was this?
Uh, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah. Uh, did you hear what
I heard your question. What's the school?
it's Wharton, and the specific program is called the Lauder Institute.
Oh, the Lauder. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, um, so like I've supported, tons of clients on sort of the dual application for Lauder.
Hmm.
I would say in the Lauder essay specifically, like, it's about sort of bringing that international, like basically like why you're interested in sort of the international business experience. Um, you can almost think of it as sort of like a complement to uh, uh, your um, your general Wharton application,
Hmm.
but sort of
Yeah.
that particular lens, right? Of like basically you have to explain like why international business, and really make it real for them, for
Hmm.
incredible sort of signals of like international experiences you've had, international experiences that relate to your professional background, and sort of how that distinct value proposition would support and sort of build on your larger sort of Wharton narrative.
Right. The other thing though is that I'm a deferred applicant, and as I understand it, I can't apply as a complement. Uh, it doesn't go at the same time. I first have to be admitted to the deferred program, and only later, like 2 years down the line, once I've done my deferred time, only then can I apply to Lauder. And this is what I'm wondering. I have a very clear idea of my narrative. I have a very clear idea of what sort of trajectory. I just don't want to put the cart before the horse.
So
Um,
what's the question, I guess? Like, I would say I would build the deferred application,
mhm,
sort of as you would, right, if you were applying to Wharton.
yeah.
And then I think once you get admitted, then you can build out that sort of augmented international ambition, to build out the Lauder essay, or the
Okay.
Lauder
So
application
sort of
program.
keep it domestic first, maybe, and for
No, I
Lauder.
think I think it's fine. I think it's fine to talk about your interest in international business in the application, right? Um, I would just, because like, there's like, I work with clients all over the world, right, who want to go work in different countries, or right. So I think it's
Yeah.
fine to talk about your interest in international business.
Mhm.
But I would sort of, I would tailor it around sort of the general Wharton application to get that right.
Yeah.
And then you can augment that. Will set a nice foundation then, for when you build the Lauder application later.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a great question. All right, let's see. I got a question here. What does a mediocre essay look like? So what I would say is like that's a hard question to answer because you can sort of get it can sort of be mediocre for a lot of different reasons. I think one is like the ideas don't really fit together. I think one is like the essay is not that interesting. I think one is like it's very generic. There's lots of buzzwords. It doesn't feel that personal or reflective. The writing is low quality. Um, uh, there's a lot of it doesn't feel very tight or cohesive. There's a lot of content that really doesn't need to be there. Um, Probably the biggest place I see folks who are trying to write really good essays get it wrong is sort of the complexity and cohesion of the ideas. You want to present something that's very insightful and very thoughtful to them, and that takes work to get right. All right, what should applicants do after submitting their applications to stay engaged with the school? So that's a good question, Nicholas. I would say you can prepare for the interview. That will help. They have like the online chats and events and things that you can pursue. Um, you don't really need to do too much else, to be honest, to stay engaged. If you have folks that are there, or if you've met folks while you were there, you can keep them abreast on the status. But that's really all you need to do. I mean, like if your question is about to help you with admissions, there's nothing really you need to do. If your question's about, because you want to stay close to the school, then I would say you can reach out to friends. You can, follow those online chats. You can, continue doing research or things to prepare for the interviews. All right. Here's a great question. What would be the best way to navigate working on MBA applications while working on a very demanding job? That's an excellent question. That's one of the challenges of MBA. The MBA process. So what I would say is this is one of the reasons that partnering with somebody who has more experience can really help. So the goal, right, is to help you work efficiently and sort of work smarter, so that you're not sort of writing and scrapping and writing and scrapping and feeling like you can't get to something that's very insightful and sort of covers the right things and will resonate with them. And so I would say, I think it's really worth being strategic and thinking about how you can sort of get to what's right as fast as possible to sort of maximize the ROI of your time. So that's a good question. All right. Is it looked down upon if we want to go back to the same industry we came from after an MBA, specifically tech? Neha, great question. I would say no, to the extent that you can sort of tell that story, right? So when you say same industry, like my mind goes to, okay, well, like why don't you just stay? you know? So if it's a role in a different capacity, then I think you would need to talk about how that's the role that you want to go to, like want to ultimately move to. And then the question will become, can you not pursue internal mobility, to get there? Like how would an MBA sort of facilitate that move and how do you know that sort of an MBA is the right path to help you get there? To the extent that you can get them comfortable with those questions, you're all set. That's what I would say. All right. IELTS score acceptable. Um, so I think yes is what I would say. I would double check with the schools you're applying to, but for the most part, yes. All right. Any other questions from the group? I'm happy to stay a couple extra minutes long if anybody has any last questions. Okay. Thank you so much for joining. Good luck. I hope everybody, got a lot out of this session. If you have any follow-up questions, message me on the platform. I would love to work with you. I have space for round two, and obviously still have space for deferred. I have been, taking on some clients with round two. So I would say if you're interested in working together, like I would reach out pretty soon, and we can build a plan to move forward. And I mean, with the incredible value the Leland team is offering, with the 3 months of Leland Plus, which again is super valuable resource, as well as the MBA boot camp. That those are two huge value adds. So reach out and let's talk about how we can work together. And thanks a lot for attending. Take care, everyone.